This is the Authentic Change Podcast, and I am Mike Horne. Authenticity reflects what we want from each other and our organizations. Open communication, trust, community, fun, and opportunity. I want to help you to do your best in your personal and professional relationships. This podcast delivers expertise, insights, and approaches on authentic leadership. To live your purpose, to lead from your values, to establish connected relationships, to steward people and culture change, to build and sustain prosperity, and to open doors and possibilities. This podcast will assist you in paving the way forward to personal, team, and organizational prosperity.
Welcome to another episode of Authentic Change with Mike Horne. I am absolutely delighted to have as our guest today, Dr. Beverly Kaye. She's laughing already. There's no laughter for this. Dr. Beverly Kaye is recognized internationally as one of the most knowledgeable and practical professionals in the areas of career development, employee engagement, and retention. And just before I go any further, these are the topics that are particularly relevant to our podcast today, where we're going to explore how to slow down the Great Resignation. Dr. Kaye, Bev's contributions to the field of engagement and retention include the Wall Street Journal bestseller, Love 'Em or Lose 'Em, Getting Good People to Stay, which is now in its sixth edition. I think the newest edition, the sixth edition, came out in March or April of 2021. It's a great read. If you haven't already read it, pick it up. But beyond that, Dr. Kaye's books in the career development field include Up Is Not the Only Way and Help Them Grow or Watch Them Go. And those have provided managers who are overwhelmed with a better way to blend career conversations into their everyday routine. Again, I am so delighted to have Beverly Kaye in the studio today. And Bev, would you say a few words about yourself?
Sure. One is that Mike and I go back a long way, decades. Mike was a client at a variety of organizations, starting with Marriott many, many, many years ago. And my early work in career development, I think we delivered at Marriott. And, last night I had to do a podcast for India. And I didn't like doing a podcast at 8:00 at night. But one thing the podcaster asked me is, how have I kept my energy up, all these years? And, my best answer is, I do love what I do. And I realize right above my office door are the words, do what you love and love what you do. So maybe it's ingrained in my whole brain for a long time. And I don't love it every minute. I don't love it every day. I did not love it this morning. But right now, talking to you, I love it.
And Bev, it's at least the parts of you that I know have focused a career on the topics of retention, engagement, career development, so timely right now as employees have choices, as they think about the future, given all of the challenges we have with the endemic, with the global pandemic. Bev, what's been the thread throughout that? I was introduced to your work very early. I think it may have been one of your first books, which was Designing Career Development Systems. It was a groundbreaking book at the time. And you have sustained this interest over decades now. What's been the key to doing that, in addition to the love you show?
Drugs?
No, I don't think so.
I couldn't resist. No. Here's where luck meets opportunity. That the subjects I chose to be my specialty have been evergreen. And I think I've worked hard to keep them evergreen. You mentioned that Love 'Em or Lose 'Em has had 6 editions. It first
and I believe
came
sold
out,
close to 700,000 copies, which
right,
is an incredible accomplishment.
right, and over 20 years and over 3 generations. And maybe part of it is we're not getting it yet. You know, it's a simple message, yet hard to implement for leaders whose plates are full and whose cups runneth over. Like, how do I make time for this conversation or that conversation? So I've talked about making these things happen in the flow of work forever. And if ever that's been true, it's true now, when maybe we're not having that career discussion 2 times a year and filling in our IDPs,
Right.
etc. So the idea of staying in tune with the times and changing the message, to stay in tune, but not throwing the message out and starting all over again.
So, Bev, it's an evergreen issue. And I'm reminded of our colleague, Warner Burke, who said that we had a selection issue when it came to leaders, that despite 30 years now, 40 years of social science research that tell us that technical skills aren't what makes people succeed as leaders and as managers. Do you think we have a selection problem when it comes to engagement and retention? I mean, the topics which are so important today. Is it can we place most of the responsibility at the feet of managers, or is it somewhere in between?
I'm really glad you asked that, because I absolutely believe it's somewhere in between. In fact, the partnership, and I call this my 3S theory, S as in sing. And it's a Venn diagram. And the first S for the employee is spark. In the world of career and the world of engagement, the employee has to say, here's what I want. Here's how to engage me. So that's the spark. Knock on, if not your manager's door, somebody's door, and let them know. The second S is for the manager, and it's support. It is not being the answer machine. And I think what stops managers is that from having the career discussion is that they think they have to have the answer for every single employee. No, you don't. And what I say is the questions are non-negotiable. You better have the questions, and you better listen to the answers. And then the third that completes it is the systems and the structure. And that's where HR comes in, and that's where your leadership comes in. Are we providing the right, I call it surround sound, for that model to operate?
When we think about spark and support and the systems, it's another way perhaps of thinking about the 3-legged stool of employee, manager, and organization.
Right.
But in an updated framework to think about the systems and the structures,
right,
that human resources leaders and others, executives and organizations, are able to create and to help maybe an employee find a pathway to creating that spark.
Right. And it's their own private, it's the pathway that works for me. not the pathway that works for him or her, but I have to discover the pathway that feels right to me.
Bev, what are your observations and what are your insights? And if you were a prognosticator of the future, have we entered a period where I know that we can reference these as evergreen issues, but are we at some sort of tipping point, at a new inflection point relative to how employees are thinking about careers? I mean, certainly a long time ago, we left the velvet coffin, right? The cradle to grave.
I remember that.
Yeah. And what's your sense of, and what does your work tell you today? I mean, are we in a different period?
Thankfully, you have to keep growing, you have to keep changing. And maybe COVID has been the extra stick of dynamite to blow up what we always thought work had to be. So I'm an appreciator of COVID global change in our world, which makes everyone think about, am I doing what I want to be doing?
Mm-hmm.
And you and I talked about that, the headline, The Great Resignation, everybody's leaving. The truth is, no, not everybody's leaving. But
Right.
yes, some are. And those who are looking for a better environment for themselves.
Almost immediately before we had the Great Resignation, which is a topic on the minds of so many HR leaders and other executives today. But before that, we were seeing the first references of ghosting, employees ghosting, like going for the interview, not showing up. And I just wonder if there's some new trend in the environment that we need to be more aware of. Or do we really, in part, I know that we need to reinforce what we can do to support managers, that second S,
right?
Because that does become one of the key ingredients for a successful manager, the know-how and the ability to coach, to mentor, to develop others.
Right. One thing that comes to mind, I think that ghosting is bad manners.
Oh yeah,
somebody's mommy or daddy didn't say, no, you don't treat other people that way. And I would love for hiring managers who were ghosted to call that person and say, don't you ever do that again. So they learn. And that's just words from an elder.
No, great. So how do we support managers now? I mean, to have the courage to engage in discussions which are so timely and so important. I know one thing is just letting yourself off the hook to think that you have to have all of the answers or any of the answers for the employees. But in addition to that, what do leaders and organizations need to do in order to create that kind of environment?
One thing that comes to mind is the words, be honest. And I'll tell you where it comes from. One of the books I wrote is on the stay interview.
Yes.
A simple idea that we coined, and the biggest mistake I ever made is not trademarking it, because everybody got on the wagon. But we did write a book on the stay interview. And here's what we found, that what doesn't make sense is at the exit interview for a manager to say, what can I do to keep you?
Yeah.
Because then it's too late. And when I say to managers, ask that question sooner. I want to keep you on my team. What can I do? They look at me and they say, Bev, if I ask that question, the answer would be more of something, more money, that other position. And it's usually something I can't give. So I'm opening up Pandora's box. And I say, no, you're not. All you have to do is say the truth and say, I can't deliver that right now. My hands are tied. What else matters? And I've said to managers, around the globe, if you ask what matters 3 times and you don't get something you can do something about, send me hate email. And I've never gotten that hate email. So it's like, I can't do that. Not now.
That's
but
wonderful.
I don't want to lose you, is the message.
I wish I had that advice earlier, because having been on different sides of that equation as a human resources executive, making last-ditch attempts to keep talent. Sometimes it works. It's not always been a monetary solution. But I think what I observed in leading HR teams and contributing to a business, that even when we made those heroic saves, it often didn't last very long.
Right.
And having been on the other side as an employee who offered lots of money when announcing that I would resign, it never worked for me, because I always thought, where were you 6 months ago or a year ago? And when the issues probably weren't financial, but they were probably about how can I grow in this job? How can I grow into other parts of the organization? So that's just great advice for others to have in terms of opening up conversations that do encourage people to stay. Do it early.
I would say to you, the employee in you, yes, they should ask, but so should you. When we wrote the first edition of Love 'Em or Lose 'Em, and it sold so well, we had the idea of rewriting it for employees. And we titled that book, Love It, Don't Leave It. 26 ways to get what you want at work. And 20 years ago, it did not sell. And when we looked at why, organizations were nervous about employees asking for more.
Right.
Yeah, we have enough trouble training our managers. We don't need more employees saying they want. And I think if I rewrote it now, and I should think about that now we're finally saying, hey, employee, the onus is on you more than we ever have. And they need to learn how to take that onus and translate it.
Yes. And as a talent developer, I often asked a question as we segmented our top talent into platinum talent and gold talent and silver talent, even among our top performers, that, top of the 9-box quadrant. The question was, what's an offer you couldn't refuse? But I often found that as a talent developer, I probably wasn't the right person to be asking that question. It was, how do we encourage the manager to have that conversation with the employee? Because you might have the system or the structure to support talent development professionals to have those conversations with employees. But if we miss the middle, if we miss the manager, we miss the employee, I think.
Right.
So
and here's what I learned from developing training programs and learning programs is that, I'll say it this way, stuck managers stick people.
Yeah, very good.
If you feel stuck yourself and you never had a manager who asked you about your career dreams, and right now you don't see any mobility for yourself, how do you coach somebody else out of that stuck place?
Right.
You can't.
It seems that perhaps we can relate these to the topic of authentic behavior, authentic leadership behavior, which for me is all about congruency. Do my words, my thoughts, my actions align? And when I don't feel that alignment, it's difficult to feel happy. And perhaps there's some underlying fear that if I do speak up about my career, I'll be thought of in a less favorable way. I'll be sidelined. I'll be put out to a different team saying, maybe not happy here. Maybe it could be happy somewhere else.
Right.
So how do we encourage that, that growth of authenticity, that it's okay for a manager to say outside of the performance review period or the development plan period to say, we can have a conversation about your career anytime you want.
Right. And that maybe eventually will grow into that statement is a given, period. That it's a given in the goals of the company. It's written on the walls. And it is employees who have to, I always want to say to employees, if your manager is not a manager where you can knock on the door and talk, then go talk to someone else. It doesn't have to be that way. And there are others who are easier and make sense for you to talk to.
Yes. And, so much of engagement, as you know, is within the influence or within the domain or within the control of the manager. But having that freedom, having that possibility to know that you can have a best friend somewhere else in the organization who perhaps is not your manager, but that someone has your back, maybe it provides the kind of encouragement, some need to have that conversation about what's next. Or how do I continue to grow in this role in a way that makes a valuable contribution to everyone?
Right. And, in my career work, I talk about the 5 Ps, and it's person, perspective, place, possibilities, and plan. And perspective means get it from all the different people you can get it from. How do they see you? When they think of you, what comes to mind? What's your rep? What's your reputation? What are you known for? And I think a reputation is worth dollars, because I think people choose you for your rep to be on their team. And if you're a development focused leader, your rep will get others to want to be on your team.
That's true. I mean, I think I think about those managers who are developmentally focused. Those are the teams that people want to be on. They're the envy of other teams in the organization. It has the possibility of creating that all too rare experience of a eureka career moment, a moment where you really feel that you bring your best to what you do. So that requires a lot of managerial skill, I would imagine, that to foster open communication, to be transparent, to have a sense of accountability, and to provide some stewardship to an employee. How do we get that to happen?
I think we make it simple and practical. All of my work is around when I finish giving a keynote, when I used to do more training, if there's managers in the room, I want them to think, I could do that. That's not so hard. And the same thing with employees. And if I can get them to say, I never thought about it that way, I could ask that question.
Well, and
then
that's
I landed.
And that's certainly what you do. If anyone in our audience has attended a Beverly Kaye keynote, you know that you get the lift from those ideas right away, and you can be energized into actions. And it doesn't mean rearranging your world. I often think, when it comes to the topic of inclusion in organizations and the many frameworks, I learned from two colleagues, Fred Miller and Judith Katz, that the best and maybe the easiest thing to do to create inclusion is to say hello. And I think you've commented on that in your work as well, that, it's an old technology, but saying hello to someone, acknowledging them can make a world of difference to an individual.
Right.
How do we get people to do more of that, Bev?
This is not the how, but a side story. One organization that I was in wanted to push that. And they had a 6-foot rule. And they said, the minute you come within 6 feet of someone, you must look at them and say hello and put your phone down. That was the days when we were all inside.
Yeah.
And people laughed at it, but it started a new wave of people stopping, looking eyeball to eyeball and saying, hey, how are you?
And we are challenged today because as I talk with my clients and others, often they're going back into offices now, at least a couple days a week. And what one related to me this week is that when she goes into the office, she wears a mask. If she wants to meet with her boss, she wears a mask. If she orders lunch on the from the campus canteen, it's done online. And
That's right.
So, how do we begin to create this in what's become a more electronically mediated environment for many workers?
Yesterday I had a meeting with a whole team, maybe 8 people in another organization. And they're all on my screen in 8 little boxes. And I started studying their faces. And I watched, just like you just looked up and smiled, they all had energy on their faces. We were talking about an interesting subject. And I commented about the smiles and their eyes were lit. And all of a sudden, I saw them all looking at each other on the screen. And maybe we just need to take that in and comment.
Right.
At first should I say that? But I couldn't resist because their energy grabbed me.
Has the pandemic increased the managerial burden in order to stop the Great Resignation? Because as many comment to me, you go to a Zoom meeting, you're there for an hour, maybe 2 hours, maybe some longer meetings. And at the end, okay, screen's off. I don't really need to see these colleagues right now. Yes, right. Goodbye, right?
Right.
So It seems to me that we've created a situation, if we want to escape this great resignation, that we've also increased the burden on managers to do more.
I think we have, and it reminds me, one thing that I'll make available to anybody on this podcast, it's on my website, is a list of 26 ways to reconnect with your remote employees. And love them is written according to the alphabet. So I took the 26 letters and I said, try this one or try that one. But they want you to knock on their door. And for you and I who grew up in this human behavior movement and all of that, it's easy. For a person who grew up in a tech environment, my husband is a rocket scientist, a real one. And it doesn't come easy, these conversations.
Yes.
So we need to say, try saying this. and that helps.
Or
It helps.
Having worked and supported many scientists and engineers, sometimes my advice is also listen better.
Right.
But part of listening, it creates the invitation, doesn't it?
Right.
So whether it's the hello or whether it's the ability to sit there with a person, it creates an invitation for a career development discussion, which leads to engagement and retention. So important. Bev, is there a certain point where you say, "Oh, I really ought to be concerned about this," or is it, is there a trigger that causes us to get excited about the topics of engagement and retention, or do we need to pay attention to it as sort of a standing item in the experience of work?
Maybe it's as easy as, what do I notice today? What do I notice about Mike? And saying it, one of the articles I wrote ages, I'm always trying to rhyme, and was that if we only noticed, it would be wonderful. And then there are 3 levels after noticing. There's it's recognize. I see what I see. It's verbalize. You don't seem so happy with that assignment. And then it's mobilize. Maybe I should take you off it. So recognize, verbalize, mobilize. And if you just do step 1, recognize, Mike, you seem off today. What's going on?
Right.
That's enough. But if you add the other 2, it's even better.
It's that sense of acknowledging the individual, perhaps going back to some of the humanistic values that underlie most of what we do, is understanding that people are not elements of production, but are, individuals with hopes and needs and wants, regardless of status in an organization, regardless of career choice. It's important to bring those values, and I suspect that they underlie much of the core of your work over several decades, these types of values, Bev.
Yeah. And being married to a rocket scientist, I hate when I say, and it's not rocket science, because he always jumps on me when I say that. But I love that now engineers are learning, tech people are learning about the soft skills, the human skills, all of that, how important they are. And they are the power skills. And maybe they're skills we said, not as important, but boy, now we're saying, oh, yes, they are. And I think that's great.
Absolutely fabulous, Bev. And it's difficult to know where to land this episode because there are so many wonderful ideas just in the time that we've been together that our audience can perhaps think about, act on, discuss with another person. I mean, I've got 3 S's, I've got 5 P's, I've got ways to notice people, all in our 30 or 40 minutes together. Bev, if you were going to offer some critical advice relative to the period we're now in, relative to this great resignation, what would be the 2 or 3 pieces of salient advice that you would give to employees and managers about the topics for which you're most passionate? Development, engagement, retention. What would be those pieces of advice today?
It sounds so simple.
You are a practical person.
Simplicity.
And I don't know. Most managers, most business people that I know like that. And I think that's what's, contributed to, the success that you've enabled others to have.
Right.
What is this advice?
In a way, the publisher that I've worked the most with in my career believes that the title of your book should say it all, not the subtitle, not any, just the title. And in a way, I worked hard to do that. Up is not the only way is a great piece of advice. Help them grow or you are gonna watch them go is a great piece of advice. Love them or lose them says it all. And maybe it's those simple things. And maybe for a manager, well, I'm going to try love them this week just to see the different ways I can love them. Is what we have to do. Or what can I do out of the ordinary?
Bev, even the titles of your book are just the framework for, almost every career development, retention, and engagement conversation. Love them or lose them. Love it, don't leave it. Hello, stay interviews. Goodbye, talent models. Help them grow or watch them go. Up is not the only way. It's a framework for a variety of conversations, productive conversations in which managers and employees can engage.
Right.
Bev Kaye is an author, speaker, thought leader. She has received a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Association for Talent Development, and again, recognized as one of our most knowledgeable professionals in the area. So important as we navigate our way through the great resignation. Bev, how can people get in touch with you? What's the way to contact and get in touch with all of the resources that you and your team offer?
Really easy. BevKaye.com is my website. Love to hear from you. And, I just want to say a word to the listeners of the podcast. Mike, your book on authenticity, I think, and I hadn't thought of this before, authenticity runs through everything I just said. I mean, a non-authentic human being cannot love them, cannot help them grow. So maybe you and I need to write something, honey.
It reminds me of one of the great tools that the Beverly Kaye firm had. It's an early tool that influenced me, and I used it throughout my career. And this is why, in part, I directed our conversation to values. Bev had a tool, invest in your values. Still so do. Important to figure out who you are, what you do in order to have the self-awareness that's required to lead authentically and to really engage people in all the ways that Bev has talked about today. So for our audience, everyone, easy to reach out to the sage on the stage, Dr. Beverly Kaye. Reach her at bevkaye.com. That's BEVKAYE.com. A wealth of resources. Dr. Kaye, thank you so much for being a guest on Authentic Change. It's just been my absolute pleasure to reconnect with you and to spread the word about the important work that you're doing that has such great relevance to the topics that are at hand. Bev, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, until the next episode of Authentic Change, stay well.
Thanks for listening, and I hope you'll subscribe today and tell a friend about our show. If you're looking for hands-on help to increase your success through authentic change, or have a question you'd like to hear me answer here, please email me at mike@mike-horne.com.